progressive reading style of creeping along, reading every day. We've come to chapter 50. How did that happen? Well, 50. What are you, a gentleman? Less than 3 months after Hamlet's death, do you know that Shakespeare's son died and his name was Hamnet? And then he has a character, Hamlet. And of course we know who he is, John Shakespeare. 3 months, less than 3 months after Hamlet's death, John Shakespeare was awarded a coat of arms by the Garter, King of Arms. He became a gentleman, and of course his son would share that appellation by inheritance. That's his father. It is more than likely, in fact, that Shakespeare himself was responsible for the renewal of the application that his father had made and then dropped 28 years before. The cost of obtaining the coat of arms had then seemed prohibitive. I don't know what you do. You buy your way into nobility. Maybe that's how you become a gentleman. You pay to give money. Maybe just buy it. Prohibited bro. But in the milder climate of Shakespeare's newfound affluence, that implement had gone. It is difficult to be sure that of the time needed to procure such a suit, but Shakespeare must have entered his father's submission before Hamlet's death. It would have been fitting and appropriate for Shakespeare to wish to pass on his new status to his only son in natural succession that Hamlet's death frustrated. The coat of arms was a rebus, a pun on the name of Shakespeare, on the grant of arms, and heraldic drawing was sketched at the top of the page. It showed a falcon holding a spear perched above a shield and crest. The falcon is displaying its wings in the action known as shaking. Falcon shaking. The motto included here, known sainz, droict, means not without right. Shaken spear. The shaken spear was of gold tipped with silver, as if it were some courtly or ceremonial staff, and the falcon itself was considered to be a noble bird. The livery of the Earl of Southampton contained 4 falcons. It is possible that Shakespeare was claiming some kind of relationship with them. The whole device is somewhat assertive and no doubt reflected the conviction of the Shakespeare males, at least one of them, that they were indeed gentlemen. The Garter, King of Arms, had granted these arms to John Shakespeare, being solicited by credible report informed, quote, that his, quote, parents and late grandfather for his faithful and valiant service were advanced and rewarded by the most prudent prince, King Henry VII, of famous memory, unquote. This seems to have been sheer invention on Shakespeare's part. There is no record of any Shakespeare being honored by Henry VII, but it may have been one of those, quote, family stories that are believed without necessarily being investigated. Shakespeare seems to have been preoccupied with heraldry and Richard II. He displays considerable technical knowledge of the subject, while Catherine says in The Taming of the Shrew, quote, if you strike me, you are no gentleman, and if no gentleman, why then no arms? To which Petruchio replies, oh, a herald, Kate, oh, put me in thy books. There is In the same play, an episode clearly taken from a volume of heraldry, Lee's Academ's of Armor, suggesting that Shakespeare was reading such books as early as 1580. He wished to demonstrate and to publicize to the world his gentle state. It was a way of setting himself apart from the still ambiguous reputation enjoyed by most players. It was also an indirect way of associating himself with the Ardens of his mother's line. In a more immediate sense, he was restoring his family's reputation after the sudden and perplexing withdrawal of John Shakespeare from public business. At this late date, it may seem a mere contrivance, honorific, without meaning, but in the late 16th century, it was a sign and emblem of true identity. It afforded the bearer proper individuality as well as a secure place within the general hierarchy of the community by combining emblem with reality, spectacle, and decoration. Heraldry truly became a Tudor obsession. There were no fewer than 7 standard texts on the book subject. In this, at least, Shakespeare was very much a man of his age. The world of his drama is that of the great house or of the court. None of his central protagonists is, quote, low-born, to use the phrase of the time, but is a gentleman, a lord, or a man. The only exceptions are the protagonists of Merry Wives of Windsor. Citizens all, the common people, are, in the mass, described by him as, quote, the rabble. But John Shakespeare's right to bear arms was not without critics. From the late 1590s onward, the York Herald, Sir Ralph Brooke, had challenged the decisions of the Garter King of Arms, Sir William de Thick, in granting arms to apparently unworthy recipients. There were accusations of malfeasance, if not explicitly of fraud or bribery, in Brooke's list of 23 mean persons who had been granted arms wrongly. The name of Shakespeare came 5th. The qualities of the recipient were called into question, to which William de Thick replied that, quote, the man was a magistrate of Stratford-upon-Avon, a justice of the peace. He married the daughter and heir of Arden, and of a good substance and ability, unquote. There is at least one false note in this defense. Mary Arden was the daughter and heir of a very obscure branch of the Arden family, and it is likely that the Shakespeares exaggerated her ancestry, as in their former claim of a forefather rewarded by Henry VII. The ambition outran the reality. In fact, the dispute had become public. Knowledge must have been an irritant, to put it mildly, to Shakespeare, whose assertive emblem and motto had now been cast into doubt. This did not prevent him, however, from applying 3 years later for the Shakespeare arms to be impaled with the arms of the Arden family. He may have done this to please his mother and be partly proud, as the citizen says, of Coriolanus, but it suggests the persistence and quality of his interest in such matters. He also received some barbed criticism from a dramatic colleague. In Every Man Out of His Humour, Ben Jonson introduces a vainglorious rustic Sogliardo who acquires a coat of arms. Quote, I can write myself a gentleman now, unquote. He says, quote, here's my patent. It cost me £30. By this breath, unquote. The arms include a boar's head to which an appropriate motto is suggested. Quote, not without mustard. This has generally been taken, not without reason, as an allusion to Shakespeare's, quote, not without right. It says not without mustard. The quote, the boar's head. And he says not without right. The mustard may also refer to the bright gold of the Shakespearean coat, so his newly found eminence did not go without some malicious comment. See, they mocked him. So you shouldn't mock me when I read this. Yet, characteristically enough, Shakespeare was also able to satirize his own pretensions in Twelfth Night, performed in the period when Brooke was challenging the Thing's bestow of arms upon the Shakespeare. The Stuart Malvolio has pretensions to gentility. He is persuaded to wear yellow stockings, cross-gartered, with a cross-garter, garter crossing on each leg and at his lower body. There would, therefore, have been seen as a grotesque parody of Shakespeare's coat of arms. These arms were also yellow, with a black diagonal band. Malvolio is by far the most deluded and ridiculous character in the entire play. And in the cross-gartering episode, he ambles and simpers upon the stage in a caricature of gentility. Quote, some are born great, some act greatness. He declares, quote, and some have greatness thrust upon them. That's from which play? We're reading from the play Twelfth Night, I believe. And he says, some are born great, some are act greatness. He declares, and some have greatness thrust upon them. If Shakespeare played the part of Malvolio, it seems to be likely the joke could not have been more explicit. It would have come naturally to Shakespeare to parody his pretensions to gentility at the same time as he pursued them with the utmost seriousness to mock that which was most important to him. It was a part of his instinctive ambivalence in the affairs of the world. We are reading from chapter 50. What are you, a gentleman? This is from Shakespeare and his personal life as reflected in his own plays. We are reading from the biography of Shakespeare.